Welcome back to Theology for the Unwanted. I'm your host, Dan Tilson, and across from me, I have my trusty co-host, John Byram. Say what's up.
Hello. And what's up? There we go.
There we go.
Nailed it.
So, John, today we are putting on our ecclesial hard hats. We're going to a construction site.
Safety first.
Yeah, with the news that Pope Leo XIV is moving into the Apostolic Palace. But we talked about this. There was something strange about where he's moving.
I think it's very beautiful where he's moving.
Tell me more.
So he is ditching the papal apartments that Pope Francis frequent.
Well, yeah, it was the guest. Pope Francis lived in the guest house across the street from the Vatican.
Okay, there you go. And then you have the Apostolic Palace,
right,
where Jasmine and Aladdin and no
Disney characters,
all the Disney characters live. And he has chosen a personal favorite of people here, at least in the DC area, the rooftop bar of the Vatican, if you will.
Honestly, it's so cool. Yeah, he's literally moving above the Apostolic Palace into what was formerly like the servants' quarters.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see, John and I have a photo of it here. But if you go to Google Maps, go to the Vatican, and of course, you can imagine St. Peter's Square. It's got that like semicircle. To the right of the semicircle and the colonnade, there's this rectangular building. And if you look at the top of it in Google Maps, you can even see like the Pope is getting his own outdoor corridors. Apparently, he's having a kitchen installed because he likes to prepare his own lunch.
To have a menagerie.
And he's installing his own gym.
Buff Pope 2026.
I love it. Fitness is for the saints.
There you go.
So anyway, we're going to talk about that in the episode, but the reason why we're bringing it up is not because of the fact that he's moving into the Apostolic Palace, but because he chose and assigned two very specific priests to move in there with him. We're going to talk about why that's relevant and what clues these two assigned priests give us about the future of the laws of the church. Before we go into that,
of course,
John, do you have anything fun from the week that you want to tell the listeners?
Yeah, so nothing work related, which shockingly enough, a lot of people actually cared about that story when I told it back in October. That was kind of cool. No, something kind of funny that happened. My goddaughter, Ashley, she is, oh my gosh, almost 2, almost at the terrible 2s. And her parents and I have season tickets to our alma mater for the women's basketball team. And we have these seats that are on the court, where like on these risers kind of thing. And Ashley's her name, is absolutely adamant that everyone sits with her wherever she sits. She likes to sit on the riser, not on the padded chairs that we paid for, but on the hard riser. So she will go down the line, and whether she knows you or not, she will grab your hand and pull you until you get off your seat and you sit on the riser. And then she will go around and sit in between each individual person. And if a single person sits up or stands up to sit back in their chair, she throws a fit and will pull you back down. It was the funniest thing ever. And then one of the longtime fans there that go to the games took a picture of it and put it on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it, and tagged it as like her favorite little fan rearranging the seating bowl of the arena kind of thing. And it was cute. It was funny. It was a little irritating because it was actually a really close game and it was a really good game, but we couldn't see sitting down that low because of the chairs in front of us. But it was a good time. It was kind of funny though.
I love it. You know, I'm so looking forward to the Olympics, which start in just a couple days. They're in Milan. Did you find out if the hockey rink ever got approved? I know the NHL was thinking about not allowing our players to go over there. But of course, they're on the winter break anyway, so it must have gotten worked out. I just feel like every 2 years we hear a story about whatever host city is not able to get their act together, and like people are threatening to withdraw the events because it just costs so much, and these I don't know, stadiums that they have to build for 2 weeks are always behind schedule.
Yeah, and they always start so late too. So yes, the Milan ice hockey arena, depending upon your source, the BBC says it will not be ready in time for the Olympics. You have others saying that it will be ready. They want to make sure the ice quality will be good enough, which, as someone who played hockey back in the day, bad ice is horrible for your knees and ankles.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. I mean, think about it. You're skating on a razor blade, essentially. And if you have soft ice, that's not good. So yeah, it's kind of crazy to think, like, we even see this in the World Cup. You get awarded the World Cup 8 years plus before you have to host it, and everyone still scrambles to get the stadiums done in time. But yet here we are.
Last possible second.
But then, you know what? I will give this. South Africa was very good at this, and I'll even get a nod to Qatar, even though I wasn't happy with the World Cup being there. Both countries found unique ways to not make every stadium permanent. Like Qatar used a bunch of shipping containers for one of their stadiums.
Oh, cool.
Because one, they just don't have the need for that tiny country to have all those major stadiums that can fit 50, 60, 70,000 people. So at the end of it, it was broken back down. The shipping containers became shipping containers again, and the pitch was donated to some field. So that was great. South Africa did the same thing, but a lot of times they build all these stadiums, billions of dollars, and they become white elephants. They just sit there abandoned and just structures reminding you of what was once there.
But you remember the South Africa Olympics, they had that 2,000-seater McDonald's.
Yes.
And I'm just like, where's the funding for that here in DC, right?
They'd probably get a lot of money for it. They're too busy building a larger ball pit in the playhouse.
Let's see, what was my last memory on that? Oh, the French had the Summer Olympics 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember everyone was wondering if the water in the Seine River was going to be safe enough for the swimmers? Because they didn't have an Olympic-sized swimming pool. They were literally using the river. And even like a week before the games were supposed to begin, it was testing positive for E. coli.
Oh, gosh.
And I remember the mayor like jumped in. She did a press conference where she jumped in the river to show people that it's safe. I was like, what is this Titanic that we're watching?
So I am looking, shout out to the hockey subreddit. They do have images of the ice hockey rink inside for Milan. It does look like it is finished. The seats look very temporary.
Okay. Are we talking like folding chairs?
I'm
Banquet
talking
chairs
like
from a wedding?
2 pieces of plastic bolted to a metal bar.
Okay.
It looks like it has a long way to go.
Since this is in Italy, I think this is a fair time to tell the story from the near disaster at my wedding a year ago. So I'm sure you've heard this by now, but the day before the wedding, our planner came to me and Chris and said...
Not the story I thought you were going to tell.
She goes, forgive my accent, guys, bad news. And I'm like, okay, tell me. She goes, there's going to be a storm. And I was like, all right, so yeah, dinner's supposed to be outside. What's the plan? She goes, no problem, guys. We have a plastic sheets. And unfortunately, the listeners can't see me making the arm motions here, but
it's beautiful. It's like he's directing an orchestra.
What is that dance in Hawaii, the hula? It was very elegant like that. So she goes, we take the plastic sheets and we put them over the table. And I was like, great, no problem. Then we'll just have dinner when the storm stops. Well, the thing is, you know how much I love Italians. I've spent so much time over there. I have learned that it is okay for me to call someone out on their mistake, but do not expect me to make it right. So the 10 minutes before the dinner is supposed to begin, I remember Barbara, the planner, she came over to me and Chris and goes, guys, bad news. There's a storm. And I'm having deja vu. I'm like, we talked about this. Like, I said, just put the sheets over. And she goes, folding her hands like she's saying a prayer. We don't have enough sheets. We only have prayers. But you remember, it was only like a sprinkle or two.
It rained for all of 5-10 minutes, and it was barely what I would call rain.
Do you remember how bad that airport was in Florence? Did you fly through there?
Okay, so I don't think you heard me. So when Brandon and Dan, because I flew in with them,
yeah,
because we purposely connected in Munich to fly over to Florence together. We got off the plane and I looked at the airport and I said, what in the 7-Eleven is this airport? Like, it was the most run down airport. And then I love this because I love countries that are very open about their past history, especially if it's bad.
Yeah.
When we were walking in right through the arrival door, as you're walking off the tarmac into baggage claim, is the new Mussolini museum display that came to Florence. And there's a big picture of Mussolini right there. I'm just like, this is very awkward. Like,
look, yes, we made a mistake, but don't make us fix it. No, the reason I brought that up was
guys,
because our wedding planner was allegedly several decades ago the director of that airport.
It explains a lot.
And when we found that out, we should have gotten a different wedding planner right away. Okay, so speaking of other professionals in Tuscany, Pope Leo XIV has assigned, and a complete surprise to many, Father Marco Billeri to live with him in the Apostolic Palace. And I think this is really cool because Marco Billeri, he's an engineer, an engineered, much like, the Pope, his first degree is in mathematics. Marco Billeri is an engineer and then later became a doctor of canon law.
Oh my.
Yeah. You know how I kind of like get the shakes every time someone says they're a canon lawyer, because in my mind, it's been so abused and so wrongly used to harm individuals, even though on paper, everything looks okay. Canon law, obviously, the supreme law of the church is love. That's true. You see that in the Catechism. You see that in canon law. However, too many people have found that sometimes you can use the rules against people. You can weaponize it. But Pope Leo himself is a canon lawyer. So, I guess it was almost a year ago. Jeez.
It's crazy to think, right?
Yeah. He's been Pope for 10 months now? He is a canon lawyer, and I've had 10 months now to see just how good of a listener he is and how you can apply the law and also at the same time be attentive to making sure that people are not harmed by it. That's the magic sauce that I think we've been missing. And of course, I recognize that canon law is super important. I'm just making the point here. We haven't always done the right thing. So Marco Billeri has been assigned to be the second secretary to Pope Leo. The first is a Peruvian priest from his old diocese. But we're going to focus here on what this assignment of Marco means for the language of the church and the future of the church over the next 2 decades. I think it gives some really clear hints as to what Pope Leo wants to do. Now, you brought up Pope Francis's living in the guest house before, right? How do you remember feeling about that when you first heard that he was shunning the Apostolic Palace back in 2013 when he got elected?
Well, as someone who has the Franciscan spirituality, I loved it. The idea of not only him taking St. Francis of Assisi's name as his papal name, but really embracing what Francis was trying to convey, not just to people who wanted to follow him in his Franciscan spirituality, but his kind of view on the gospel of Christ and what Christ was asking us to do. So you have Pope Francis who, for a lack of better terms, just to paint an image of how people view the Pope outside the church, is essentially like a king, right? Is you look at the Pope and he is the king of Vatican City. He is the king of the Catholics, if you will. And that's just kind of how it's viewed. A king is rich. A king has all these objects and these things. And then Pope Francis is like, you know what? I don't want any of that. I'm gonna keep my white cassock. I'm gonna go live in the guest house. I'm not gonna be fancy. I'm not gonna live in the Apostolic Palace. I'm not gonna be anything wild and out there. I'm just gonna live a very simple life because I am a servant of the church.
Yeah.
I thought it was beautiful.
It worked for him, both in the media and politically, because it was authentic to who he was.
Yes.
I mean, he took the bus as Pope and as Archbishop of Buenos Aires in Argentina and spent a lot of his time working in the slums. It's just who he was. I always say you got to be authentic to who you are, right? When I did media training, as someone that works in DC politics a lot, one of the stories that they tell you is of this politician who gave what I think is very bad advice to cuss in every interview.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And you know what? The person training us pointed out that you watch his video clips for whatever reason, it works for him because it's very clearly who he is. But if you have soft me talking to a camera about caring for the poor and I'm just dropping F-bombs like a sailor, that's going to cause, like, people are not going to connect with that, right? I don't know if they should connect to this politician who's cussing, but people can smell a phony. And so, Pope Leo is moving back into the Apostolic Palace. I'll tell you this, where Pope Francis lived was not grand, but neither is the Apostolic Palace. The main difference in my mind is the accessibility. And I think Pope Francis was right to really shake things up. You and I talked about how he was forcing transparency.
Yeah.
He was irking a lot of people that worked in the Vatican. Now, there's a lot of good, holy people in the Vatican, and there's also a lot of people that come from a culture where it is just acceptable to look out for yourself and for your family before looking out for your neighbor. And that resulted in some very bad things, like a $200 million investment in a luxury apartment building in London, with money that was designated for charity.
Yeah, that's not good.
But Pope Francis was also the first pope really emerging out of the massive abuse crisis that we had. Obviously, a lot of it broke during JP2, but I think we still hadn't quite figured out what was going on and why. And one of the cool things about Pope Francis was that he was living in the guest house, which is also where a lot of the people who help the Pope select the next bishops. There's 3,000 bishops around the world. The Pope clearly can't vet all these personalities by himself. So he relies on people that are in country, but then they filter that back up to Rome. And then there's a core group of staff that then investigate it and make a recommendation to the Holy Father. With Pope John Paul II, very holy man. He's a saint. I love him for many reasons. He was hoodwinked to high heavens over the appointment of so many bishops because there were times that we now know where he was aware of allegations of abuse or inappropriate action. But John Paul II was so in love with our church, which is a good thing, that if somebody critiqued a bishop, he had a very hard time believing that it was real. And that was just the world that we all lived in 2 decades ago. It wasn't that long ago.
Wow. Well,
so I think Pope Francis did the right thing by making the Pope more accessible than he has ever been at any point in history. And now I think we're all excited to have the dust settle a little bit, right? So Pope Leo is moving back into the Apostolic Palace. But what's interesting is Marco Billeri, he's a canon lawyer in Tuscany. And he comes from a diocese where the bishop is actually quite conservative. The bishop comes from, I'm Sant'Egidio. We spent all of our time with the poor and people who are discarded. This bishop is actually from a sister community of ours with a very different focus. It's called Communion and Liberation. And that is a very conservative group that was also very much favored by Pope Benedict. So I would say that Marco Billeri is a signal that Pope Leo doesn't want to throw away any of the traditions of the church, but it's fair to say that he wants to move us away from clericalism and towards a church where everyone has a say in the decisions that affect them.
Yeah, which I think is, if the church is going to effectively reach and make the people within the church feel like it truly is a community of believers, and we're trying to attract more people to the church, or at least to have them be open to the idea of, if they're a fallen away Catholic coming back to the church, or if they're, of another religion, or if they're atheist or agnostic, making their way to the Catholic Church. The one thing that will attract people is happy people, people who feel like the church is listening to them.
Yeah.
That feels like they're not just another person in the pew, but that the church actually cares about what's going on in their life. I mean, it's public relations 101. Like when you take a look at a company, it's the same thing. You want your employees to be heard. You want your employees to feel like they matter and that they have a role in the success of the company. Same thing here with followers in a religion.
Exactly. I think this is a good point. Can you tell the listeners about the reaction video that I did on Instagram this week?
Oh my goodness. So There was another content creator,
very young one. I'm not even sure he's 20 years old.
So we'll say this. Good friend of the show, Cade, who we've had on before. Great guy. Had an interview with this other content creator, super young guy. They were having a discussion about the church and slavery. And in a very, very shocking, jaw-dropping moment, this young content creator made the comment that the church has never condemned slavery. In fact, the church actually encouraged it. And it was just a very shocking clip. And you made a response video to it, which I thought was absolutely great, because the way you started it was just, you came out with so much vibrato, like from the get-go. You're like, okay, stop. This is not right. And the beauty of your response is you didn't make it like it was an attack on what he said, because clearly he just wasn't educated in what he was saying. Now, as a fellow convert, he was a convert, made me hurt a little bit, but you had a response video. There are a lot of other people who had response videos. He came out and issued an apology for using the wrong words. And I think that's a very valid point, is you have to be careful with how you phrase things, because they're going to come across in a way you didn't intend, which he fully admitted it came across when he listened to it. He was like, oh, wait a minute, that's not what I really wanted to say. So he even recognized he used the wrong words.
So his apology it was an interesting focus to it. I think he really felt like he wanted to defend a very technical definition in the Catholic Church. And what he accidentally said, instead of being technical, is slavery has not been condemned by the Catholic Church.
Correct.
One, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make the point that, yes, the Church has done this, and Pope Leo XIII, so not the current Pope Leo, but Pope Leo XIII was actually the one that did that. We've talked about the Church making many U-turns in theology before. This was one of them. And U-turns happen in the Church when you discover a greater truth that actually has prevented you from seeing the full picture of what once was.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this case, it's human dignity. And the thing that I really admire about young new Catholics diving into documents and like pulling out little nuggets, because I used to be like that too, right? I grew up very defensively Catholic, and I would read a document and I would defend it to the death, whether or not I thought it was relevant to me. And that may be what happened here. And I give him some caution, because there are some through lines, there are some principles. One of them is human dignity. And that permeates almost all of the social teaching of the Catholic Church since the 1880s. So if you are ever describing a principle of what the Church believes about something, and it doesn't sound like it coincides with human dignity, it might not be accurate. And I feel like he should be able to catch himself if he just has these 4 principles in his back pocket before quoting documents. But one of the things to point out is that the Church has a very, very lengthy history of saying, oops, we were off track, right? This might surprise you, John.
I'm blown away.
Okay. So we want to look at how Pope Leo XIV might look at some potentially controversial language in the Catholic Church, especially in the Catechism, over the next 2 decades, and how he might want to right-size it, because culture's changed a lot. And what we're going to say over and over again is, what is the main point? What are you trying to say? And then we're going to look at a document and figure out whether or not it is on track. So, John, you didn't like me reminding you this. Do you know what I'm about to say?
I don't.
You are older than the Catechism.
You are too.
That's true. By a year.
Doesn't matter. We're still older than the Catechism.
We're older than which doesn't mean we're wiser.
No, it definitely doesn't.
Definitely doesn't. But there was a lot going on in the Church in the 90s, and some of the language actually reflects the cultural debates of the time. We've talked about this before. The Catechism has 4 levels of teaching. So not everything in the Catechism is intended to be like, this is ironclad, right? A lot of it is, hey, we're giving you the common denominator that everyone in every culture can read right now, and at least we're on mostly the same page, and then we can go from there. There are other things like Jesus Christ is God. That's the highest level of tradition in the sense that it is revealed truth and there's no questions, right? But then there's much, much smaller things. For example, John, you and I were talking about couples who are struggling to conceive a child, right? Mm-hmm. This is a very common thing, actually. There's like 14 million Americans who are young and healthy, who are not on birth control right now, who are struggling to have a child.
Yeah.
That is not an insignificant number.
That's just in America. That's not the world. That's
right.
America alone. It's even larger when you take a look at the broader population of the entire planet.
So what's so funny is when you look at the way that the church would talk about this very difficult, sensitive topic 75 years ago, it was actually much, much, much better than what the Catechism did in 1992. Let me pull up this quote from Gaudium et Spes. Here we go. Gaudium et Spes talks about parenthood. It says, parents are the interpreters of God's love. So if you're trying to understand what does it mean to be a parent and how am I supposed to live that out, you are supposed to understand already as a parent who God is, and then with your child, you're supposed to translate that love to them so that they can then walk the faith forward.
In a perfect world, yes.
Okay.
But that's also assuming the parents are properly catechized.
Yeah, but in 1950, I mean, if you weren't going to church on Sunday, where were you? I don't know. Everyone was at church.
I mean,
it was a different world.
It was a very different world.
Yeah. And so I think back then when you had many, many nuns teaching the kids and everyone's in Catholic school, and it was a different world. Okay. And so it doesn't surprise me that the Catechism, which was written 40 years after that, decided to take a much more legal, almost medical sounding tone. But the whole point of this section we're about to go over is that a child is supposed to be the result of a physical act of love. Mm-hmm. Okay. The thing that the Catechism in this section is trying to avoid when it's talking to potential parents is you can't have a test tube baby, right? Okay, so keeping that in mind, John, please read Catechism CCC 2379.
This is so awkward. So when we're going over the notes, you had me read it too, and it's just such an awkward read. The gospel shows that the physical sterility is not an absolute evil.
Stop. As if you are a parent right now and you're like, dear Lord, I am struggling to conceive a child. What is your will for my life? And then you say, oh my goodness, we have a catechism. Let's open it up. Does that first sentence help you get the main point?
It does not.
Okay, let's keep going. Let's see if it gets better.
Spouses who still suffer from infertility after exhausting legitimate medical procedures should unite themselves with the Lord's cross, the source of all spiritual
fecundity.
Gesundheit.
Yeah. That term fecundity, by the way, we usually are referring to like giving birth, but it just kind of means like an abundance, a fruitfulness, if you will. And do you know like the fruit of the loom? Maybe I'm making this up. Isn't there like a cornucopia in their logo? That may be one of the Mandela effects that I ran into.
No, but it's been a while since I've seen Fruit of the Loom. I believe that was their logo at one point in time.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, actually, fecundity came up in an Italian homily I was listening to yesterday, not related to the show, and the priest was giving a description of almost like a Thanksgiving feast, mm-hmm. right? Okay, so if you're still suffering after exhausting all legitimate medical procedures, that's not super helpful advice.
It's not.
So I think there's a little bit of an attempt at a recovery here. Keep going.
They can give expression to their generosity by adopting abandoned children or performing demanding services for others.
Okay. I remember 2 years ago when I was having meetings at the Vatican, and they know how passionate the Catholic Church in the United States is about the pro-life cause. Mm-hmm. So someone said to me, if you want to teach someone to become a parent, teach them the value of service, because what is being a parent if it's not a lifetime of service to somebody? Right? I thought about it because I even called my dad for advice yesterday. I'm like, he's still not done. He's still not off the clock after 34 years.
Surprised he just didn't hang up on you.
And so philosophically, I think there's something there to say, like, okay, if you're desiring to be a parent, or maybe you're demanding service. But this whole paragraph, the whole point of this section is to say the Catholic Church wants you to know that a child must be produced from an act of love and not be made out of a science experiment. And I think we really missed it here.
It's like going from one extreme to the other extreme and completely forgetting there's like middle ground, right? It's like it doesn't have to be black and white. There's colors in between, but we're just going to focus on the two most extreme examples.
I can see why, given how the world changed between 1960 and 1990, why they may want to move to something a little bit more precise than a parent is an interpreter of God's love.
Yeah.
However, I gotta say, one is more helpful advice in this situation. I don't think it's the Catechism.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it too is this is also, you mentioned the church is trying to preach against test tube babies, but this is also the back end of the sexual revolution in America, right? So like you have the 60s and 70s, you have the idea of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We're talking hippies, we're talking love is love, like it's flowers, it's rainbows, it's sunshine, it's butterflies, it's all this stuff. It was a very hard pivot from that 1950s perspective where everyone went to church on Sundays. We're starting to see people rebel against this notion.
Yeah.
And they're breaking out of structure. And now the church is like, okay, well, what do we do to try to provide a little bit more structure? And we mentioned it several episodes ago, how the church had changed to become more legalistic.
Yeah.
Like when we talked about confession, we mentioned on last episode, it's like a drive-through sometimes.
Well, off the top of your head, I mean, what kind of solutions would you propose to this?
Change the words, right?
Okay.
Because here's my thing. We are a church of love. God is love. Jesus is love. Period. End of story. These words have a dagger at the end of it. Love doesn't stab you with words. One of the things I train all of the new hires with my company, I train them with the idea of no matter what you do, no matter what your position is in this company, when you deal with our customers, words matter. The verbiage matters. A customer can be upset. A client can be upset and ready to fire us and demand money back or even sue us. How you handle that situation and the words you choose and the way you say it will determine whether they file charges, whether they submit a formal complaint, or whether they're going to turn around and realize people make mistakes, you're doing your best to help them, and they stay with the company.
Right.
Words matter. I mentioned it last podcast too. Our language is not tonal. Like for words, but tone is how we express feelings behind the words. Ticked off customer is not going to be happy if you're getting an attitude and you're being sharp with them. You're not going to change people's opinions in the church or make them feel good about a bad situation that they may have by throwing words laced with daggers on them at the person.
Based off of the appointment of Marco Billeri, and the knowledge of the kind of person that Pope Leo XIV is, I suspect that in the coming years, if not in the next decade, that you might see a little bit of a shift in this section of the Catechism, which, by the way, has been edited before. This is not like a document that cannot be changed. There's an actual committee that gets together. Just in case you're wondering, if you are looking at St. Peter's Basilica, but you are outside the square, it's the building on the left on the second floor. There is a committee, and they want to make sure that we are continuing to teach the same truths in a deeper way that every culture can understand. So it is not an attack on the church to say, we need to revisit this. It's a really important act of love. And I think my prediction is Pope Leo XIV is going to try and shift the focus of the section from what the body can't do to what a person is called to do. And the key term, the term we stumbled over, fecundita, fruitfulness, for me, that is the key theological phrase in here. And how do we understand fruitfulness? Is it just some sort of biological, is it just like chemicals and things and they're mixing around and, life happens, poof? Or Is it biology, but also theology? Is it some sort of fusion of the two? And I think the church is understanding that, okay, maybe in 1960 we were just like, parents, go be translators of God love, and that maybe that wasn't deep enough. But also the very medical, cold, rigid definitions that we kind of shifted to by the 90s, that also isn't doing it. So I think it's going to focus on infertility. I don't think we say sterility as much anymore, but really emphasize that it's not a curse, right? Yeah. The first sentence that you read to me, I was like, oh my gosh, it's not an absolute evil. Well, it definitely sounds like a disease, but that you are not broken. Even though you may feel that your body is broken, you are not broken. In fact, God is calling you to a different kind of love. And through that different kind of love, you're going to teach the rest of us in the church the deeper ways that we are all called to live out our lives. Let's go on to the next one. I lumped a lot of topics together here. What are the 3 topics?
Marriage, divorce, and homosexuality.
Sounds like a best-selling novel.
It sounds like a doozy of a Netflix special.
So at first I thought about just focusing on intrinsically disordered, because in most places that phrase is like dead. It's just the church isn't using it. The French bishops have written saying like, hey, let's knock it off. There's a lot of bishops. My Archbishop, Cardinal McElroy, has called on it to be changed. There's a lot of cardinals that are like, please fix this ASAP. But as I was reflecting on this, I realized, no, actually, I think we want to look at the direction that Pope Leo is going to go altogether on marriage, divorce, and homosexuality. So, as we talked about before, Aquinas, who has given a beautiful review of all of the sacraments, there's something that he always focuses on. It's called the res tantum. It's that ultimate reason, right? Like, Jesus didn't decide that he's going to become bread for the heck of it. He definitely didn't decide he's going to become bread so that we can just stare at him. There's a reason. Do you remember what the reason is for the Eucharist, according to Aquinas?
Unity.
Yeah, it's very simple. I mean, theologians have reflected on how much we have shifted away from that language of unity. Like, yes, it's a wonderful miracle that God becomes bread, but why? And it's because when we all receive it, when all of us, poor and rich alike, sitting in the same church, and we have the body of Christ in us as a tabernacle, there's a radical unity that, for whatever reason, humans are not able to do by themselves.
No, they're definitely not.
So marriage is another sacrament. And Aquinas also says that there is an ultimate reason for it. And once again, it's unity. So I don't know, growing up in this area, I think marriage was taught to me in a very particular way. John, if you were asked about what the purpose of marriage is, what would you feel pressured to say around here?
Making babies.
It's a baby factory.
It's a baby factory. Yeah.
Is that missing the point?
It is extremely missing the point.
Yeah. So just doing the Aquinas thought experiment here. Let's say you get married in a Catholic church, 1 man, 1 woman, you pledge yourselves, the priest blesses, you go home, you consummate, and you continue to try and consummate for months on months on months. And like 14 million Americans, no baby. Okay. Are you still married in the eyes of the church and in the eyes of God?
I think a lot of people would argue no, because you're not able to conceive. And I think that's a problem.
It's a definite failure to catechize, because in philosophy, we use the term accident in a weird way, not like car accident, right? An accident is something that happens. It can be really good or really bad, but it's not like the core essence of the sacrament. And so if marriage is for that charity, that love, but it's a physical sign representing the unity of God, that is the real ultimate reason of the sacrament. And yeah, you can be married, for your whole life, being open to children, wanting to conceive a child, not having a child, and you are still perfectly validly married. And we have really messed up on conveying that fact, that you are supposed to understand your marriage as providing the grace of charity through a physical sign. there's a reason we don't have divorce. There's no undo button for Catholics in the sacrament of marriage. Yeah, no, the reality is there's lots of people who are divorced in every parish. It's a reality. But the reason the church doesn't have an undo button is actually something we talked about in a previous episode. Do you remember we talked about how the Gospel of Luke uses this one Greek word that means throwing together, right? Throwing it together in the sense that you're taking opposite ideas or opposite people, you're putting them together, fusing them as one, and that is the same Greek word that means symbol. And so Mary, when she holds things together, she's acting as a symbol. Do you remember what the opposite of that was? So we got thrown together, and the other one also meant devil.
Scatter.
Yeah. So if the marriage is this symbol given to us by Christ of unity, you can't undo God's unity. That would be scattering it.
That would be.
Same Greek word for devil. And so in a marriage, you already have this sort of, as John Paul II put it, this like nuptial meaning between you're unified with the church and you as a couple are placed underneath that. You're very much living as Mary lived. And a divorce is scattering that, or it's an undoing of the symbol. And it's the same root word for devil. So we don't have divorce as a church function, right? But if the ultimate reason is not the procreation of kids, the ultimate reason is that unity of the couple. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at what the church says about homosexuality and see if it keeps in mind the main point of marriage. Because clearly the point of this next section is to say, guys, this is not equal to sacramental marriage. Okay, John, Catechism of the Catholic Church 2357.
Basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, effective, and sexual complementarity. See, this is why I don't like reading these. Under no circumstances can they be approved.
Okay. So once again, we have a very legal, very definitive, very clear, but I'm not sure the words are super helpful.
They're
right?
not.
Okay.
They're definitely not.
Because just like we have couples who are divorced, just like we have couples who are not able to conceive a child, the reality is we have people in our church who are gay. I don't know if this surprises you.
What?
Yeah. So in the 90s, we've talked about this before, there was still this assumption that if you are gay, it is either a choice or a rebellion against the way that you were made. Now, if either of those were true, it would be sinful. However, if you are gay, if you are gay because you were born that way or made that way, or even some environmental factors would still qualify here with the natural, right? Doesn't matter why. If this is a part of who you are, whether it's a small part or a big part, we can't throw that away. And so the catechism here, although I understand that we're trying to say, hey, the ultimate reason is that unity between different symbols, right? The man and the woman represent different physical symbols and they're thrown together and fused as one underneath Christ's church. That is what makes a sacrament. However, the main point of marriage is unity. And so does this address people who are living a life of unity with a partner?
I mean, this is the biggest issue, right? Is if it's about unity, the church needs to do a better job at creating the verbiage that says it is about unity. Because if you're going to hold the act of making life, the ability to bear a child as the end-all be-all for what marriage is, you're missing the point once again in this passage.
You know, John, I think that in earlier ages, we used to be like a lot better at this whole wisdom thing. And then over time, we got more and more into these like medical, precise definitions. So when I look at early church fathers, St. John Chrysostom, He talks about he must have lived on the sea. I don't know. Where are the Ephesians? Is that Turkey?
I think so.
Okay. When the husband and wife are at odds, there is nothing but the storm and tempest. But when they are in harmony, the house is a port of peace, and no storm can shake it. It almost sounds like some Eastern religion. Oh, it's so true. I mean, he's describing the strength of a bond, and he's clearly describing it within a theological setting. So if marriage is this gift from God, that unity that's created, it's something that can overcome the storms of the world. So, all right, you look something up.
Yeah, I verified it was Turkey.
Okay, cool. Good.
It was bothering me.
I love that you have a computer over there and I don't. So like you can fact check me all day long.
I don't have to.
Oh, okay. Well,
I just like certain tidbits where I'll do that, but I have everything else going for producing. So, you know.
So again, if Pope Leo XIV is going to kind of reinvigorate that tradition of unity that you see in the early church fathers, you see it in Aquinas, and get back to the ultimate meaning within the sacraments. Yeah, he's still going to defend the bond of the sacrament as one man, one woman. Look, I just don't think he's going to delete the philosophy on that. But I think he understands that there has to be a place in the church for anyone who is demonstrating virtue, that is seeking that stability, that positivity, according to how they were made.
Yes.
Right? So if I had to guess, I think he would drop some of the 1980s language. And I think this is partially based off of, let me just tell you where I'm coming from this. The priest that he assigned, who is the canon lawyer, worked on marriage issues in central Italy. His bishop is communion and liberation. That's Benedict XVI's kind of philosophy. And so Aristide Fumagalli, who is a theologian that you and I have quoted extensively on this podcast, remember he has that theory of the possible love, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't know for sure. Is a homosexual relationship, is it good? It's a possible good. You know, it's a possible love. And I think, if I had to guess, Pope Leo XIV might go along those lines, and he might say something like, the complete sign that makes for a sacrament is one that recognizes the full differences between the persons, including the biological. So I just don't see Pope Leo XIV ever separating the male and female physical differences the way that he understands it. I just don't see him separating it. But I think he's going to shift the church to say, let's focus on the graces that exist within committed, stable, and positive relationships. And so maybe in a less insulting way, I think for gay Catholics, it's not going to be intrinsically disordered. I think it's going to be an incomplete sign. And I don't totally know how I feel about that, but that is my estimate of where we're going to end up in the next 10 years. And I think it could lead to a really helpful dialogue, even though it still hurts a little bit.
Yeah, I think the church really needs to, not only with the change of the verbiage and the words that they're using to convey the message, I feel like the hyperfixation on the act of sex is kind of really missing the point here, right? The biggest argument they have with homosexual relationships, right? If we're looking at the idea of unity, the idea of marriage is unity, not procreation, it almost seems disrespectful towards God to sit here and be like, God made you gay. God made you infertile. God made you unable to conceive. Thus, in the eyes of the community of the church, you're not a full participating Catholic because of the way God made you. And to me, it feels wrong to sit here and say God made you broken, because then we have to say God made a mistake, which does not happen. So if God made a person infertile, unable to conceive, and they don't know until they are married, and they attempt to conceive, they try to consummate their marriage, they try to conceive, they're open to the idea of children and starting a family. And now we're going to sit here and say, because you cannot conceive, your marriage may not be as valid as you think it is.
There's a very famous podcast, Catechism in a Year.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Father Mike Schmitz, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, if you need if you need catechism in 10 seconds, here it is. The supreme law is love because God is the source of love himself. And you are called to live exactly precisely as God made you. There you go. That's the spark notes of the 2,000 pages.
Which is beautiful. And then I would make the argument then in relation to what I was saying is if we're looking for unity and we're looking for a family nucleus, right? We're looking to create families in this unity. Why are we as a church in the hyper pro-life version of the church that is the United States of America? Why are we not talking more about adoption?
Oh, yes.
Why are we not saying, you know what? It's unfortunate you're not able to conceive. If we're talking about being called to service in another manner, why are we not talking about the beauty of adoption then?
It's a demanding service, by the way.
It's demanding service.
By the way, and on that note, slavery is still bad.
Slavery is still bad, yes. But my thing is we're very pro-life in this country as a Catholic church, which is fine, which also means we need to be open to the idea of pushing adoption. We have a foster care system in this country. It's not the best. I don't think that's controversial. I think we all know it's not the best. But if we're in a situation where two people who love each other in a marriage are unable to conceive because they were born with the inability to conceive, why are we not saying, you know what? We understand that's unfortunate, but the beauty is you are still called to parenthood through a unique situation where you can now adopt a child who is deemed, I'm going to say it, it's going to sound bad, but words matter here, but it's true, who was deemed unwanted by their original parent, right? If we're going to sit here and say we're a pro-life institute, we're pushing for being pro-life, we're going to have an increase of children that are not wanted and go into the foster care system. We need, as a church, if we're truly pro-life, to be pushing the idea of adoption and being open to that idea.
In the same way that Vatican II documents describe parenthood as that translation service, like between languages, you're the interpreter of God's love. Earlier moral theology would look at the love of parents who adopt, and they would say that you are actually restoring God's will for that child, God's plan in that child's life. You are restoring it. So when a child is no longer with their parents, whether there's a death or an abandonment, whatever it is, that's a disruption in their life. And the act of adoption is this theological restoration. It actually, in many ways, mimics what you see on the cross and, again, the resurrection. So a lot of these symbols, they keep working for all of these causes. So before we go to the last one, which is going to be on the liturgy wars, I know Pope Leo XIV said that he was going to not put it on the back burner, but he's not going to address it necessarily in the first 2 years. I was on that very conservative website, The Pillar. As you know, I do spend a lot of time on there, and I enjoy reading it. They put out some really, really strong Catholic content. But there was back and forth that I had because a priest at a parish not too far from here told me there are no poor people in my parish. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, my parish is very affluent. There are no poor people to serve. And I was befuddled by that. So I get in my car and I'm heading back home, and you know what I see all around me? Yeah, I see big houses, but truck with ladder, utility vehicle, internet cable company, like delivery service. I saw so many people who maybe were not qualifying as poor, but they're certainly not living in those homes.
Yeah.
And one thing that frustrates me about canon law is this idea of territoriality.
Yeah.
Okay, so the parish, you have boundaries. It was met with really, really good reason, right? Like, if somebody is in need, we need to know as a church who is responsible for that soul, right? The problem is, it is written for a world that never envisioned cars.
Yeah.
So this idea of me coming from Washington, D.C. to Woodbridge for something and then going back to D.C. later, Not a thing 150 years ago, right? Unless this is like a week-long trip.
Yeah, it's true.
So canon law has not caught up to that. And unfortunately, in being so far behind, it's lost the idea of mercy that it was once trying to impart. And so the reality is, your parish that you technically belong to under church law is based off of where you pay your taxes. You're like, what? Yeah, technically it's where you reside. But if you have two homes, if you are in a split household because, your parents are divorced and you're going back and forth, no, it's literally based off of when you get down to it and someone's like, oh, you have to pick which of these 6 parishes you technically belong to. It's going to be where you pay your taxes.
Yeah.
And so if we're trying to create this theology of presence, this theology of mercy, which is entering into the chaos of another's life, if you're trying to present that, canon law doesn't currently represent it because it's written for a different era. And so hopefully Pope Leo will address that.
I have what I would have loved to say to that priest when he said that he didn't have any poor people because they're all affluent, they're all rich. My argument would be, great. They're in materialistic ways, they're rich. Great. Are they rich spiritually?
Ooh.
That's what I would have said. And if there's one thing people know about me from this podcast or in real life, I have zero problem telling a priest, maybe you missed the mark here. I would have said that to the priest straight face, be like, look, that's great. They show up to mass in a Porsche, in a BMW, in an Audi. Here I am driving up on my little Mazda, right? I don't care. They're fine, great. They don't have debt. They've made a business for themselves. They live in a gigantic mansion. But spiritually, are they rich?
It's a really fair point. And by the way, when you have people who are wealthy materially but spiritually poor,
mm-hmm.
and then you have people who are the reverse, it actually creates this perfect mutual opportunity for growth.
Yes.
And I'm not talking in terms of giving things,
mm-hmm.
but in 2014, I visited the Scalabrinian priests in Los Angeles. And I remember
this trip.
I remember during the day, after the noon mass, parishioners would be in the kitchen cooking, and then the doors of some of the places would open up, and you'd have a flood of workers, right? Do you know how many people end up eating their lunch in their van, or even sometimes the mailmen relieving themselves in a bottle in the back of their van? The fact that a church opens their doors provides so much dignity during that lunch hour that they can sit down and feel human for a moment and feel seen. And then whether or not they use it, they have an opportunity to interact with parishioners, to interact with priests, maybe to ask for confession or the sacraments. It's this beautiful opportunity for those who have the freedom to take off in the middle of the day. There's more people than I don't know, it's easier these days with the virtual world, but like there's more people than you realize who can take 30 minutes in the middle of the day to care for the needs of others and to open the door for those who are working with trucks on ladders, you know? And it is such a beautiful way to make the Eucharist concrete because the ultimate meaning is unity. So, okay. On that note, Liturgy Wars. You know anything about this?
It's my new favorite reality TV show.
Okay. Man, if they had reality TV cameras on our conversations back when I was a liturgy geek 15 years ago, people would tune in every week to hear what we said.
This is very true. It was very interesting conversations.
Okay, so most people, I think, know that there's a lot of different rites within the Catholic Church. We have the Byzantine, the Maronite. We have the Latin rite. You have a lot of people say the traditional Latin Mass, the TLM. That's a nickname, FYI. There is no official term anywhere in the Catholic Church as traditional Latin Mass.
Careful, they're going to come for you.
It's Tridentine, Tridentine after the Council of Trent, post-Protestant Reformation. And each of these rites in the Catholic Church, they have their own lens. So we call it like a mission, right? Like what's the mission of your rites? And in the case of what we call the traditional Latin Mass, it's a very particular mission. It's to help restore that sense of adoration that the world was losing as Protestants were gaining ground. Most of the world is not interested in this mission, right? However, in the United States, You can't be a hero unless you have an enemy like the Protestants to fight. So we are interested in this.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I understand people want something concrete, something that feels old, that just has more meaning to it. I get that. But Christ did not become the Eucharist so that we could stare at him. He didn't become the Eucharist so that we could just, have this private elite devotion in a foreign language. I felt that the Latin brought me a lot closer when I was younger because it kind of took me out of my own culture. But there was also that at the same time, that little bad mixture where the devotions became very private because so few people were able to understand or see what was going on. So I think with Marco Billeri and what I think are Pope Leo XIV's, good intentions towards those who really love the Latin Mass, I think he could make a small tweak to the end, the diaconal dismissal. So you're announcing the dismissal. Instead of saying the Mass is ended, go in peace, you could add specific prayers that link the sacrifice of the altar to the sacrifice of service. We've talked about demanding service a few times, right, in this episode, but you need to understand that the altar rails, they're fine. They're totally fine, but you have to know that you are bringing the woes and the joys and the sufferings of the world to the altar.
Yes.
And if you're not do that, then why are you even bothering? I love the gifts that the people who go to the TLM bring to our church. I think to some degree are misunderstood. I think there are other people that, quite frankly, are abusing it because they want some sort of elite club. But if we can find a way where service, unity, the res tantum, the ultimate meaning of the Eucharist, is linked back to this, and it's not just about restoring a culture of adoration, then I think we can actually make this a good place for everybody, or anybody that wants it, not everybody. So, any closing thoughts, John Byram?
Pick your words wisely.
That's chapter 3 of the Catechism, next edition.
No, but I mean, I think that's what we can really sum this up with is that the church has always found ways to communicate a message to its followers, and the church has always, not every single time, but has always also found a way to fumble those words, and they're slow to change the verbiage. Now, obviously, it's slow for a reason. Right? They want to make sure if they're going to make changes that it's the correct changes using the correct words. But unfortunately, the issue is the longer it takes, the more those words can become sharper, and have a negative impact on devout followers in your religion. We live in a very interesting time in the world where there seems to be a lot of mixed messages with social media, with AI, with just how we communicate in general. If there's one thing that brings us together in unity, it should be religion. For those who believe and who follow religion, there should be a unity about that of bringing people together through the unrest that is the modern world that we live in. So I think the biggest thing here is, even when it comes to the liturgy fights, or when we're talking about gay couples or divorced couples or couples that are unable to conceive, the church has a message. How do they go about delivering it in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're being pushed out the door? That's the biggest issue here, is that the words that have daggers attached to them don't just hurt when you read it. It hurts your church community and makes people feel like they're not fully a part of the church or their community, and they start to get pushed out, and then we start to lose people in this faith because they don't feel like the church is there for them.
Just as I said, I was really encouraged that Pope Francis was living with the priests, the clergy that were helping him select the next bishops. I'm super hopeful about this new assignment with the engineer, doctor of law, Father Marco Billeri. A lot of titles. It's almost like, people who get 2 PhDs, like we can't give
doctor.
Yeah, doctor, father, professor. Like we're not going to do that. No one has the time.
I loved it when JP2, when he was canonized, right? It was the argument of like, oh, is it Pope Saint or Saint Pope, or is it?
I don't even know.
I think it's
Saint.
Saint Pope John Paul II.
Yeah.
But like that was a whole discussion. But like it's the whole title thing.
Yeah.
You go on LinkedIn. I have friends on LinkedIn that have like 8 different acronyms following their name. I don't know what any of them mean. I'm not going to ask either, but it's like they're there for a reason. But what's the reason?
Well, I feel really hopeful. I think Pope Leo the 14th is going to take us towards a church where everyone has a say in the decisions that impact them. I think if you're being harmed by the church, you're going to find even more avenues to say, hey, this is doing me wrong. But I also think that he's going to help us walk together slowly towards a greater unity so that we can realize that. And so while you should be prepared to be disappointed, because whatever your wish list is on no matter what side of the issue you are, things are not going to change quickly. But your stories matter because we have a pope who wants to listen and he wants to figure out how do we take that and integrate it into church law and church procedures. So as always, John and I are enthusiastic about reading your stories. We are so grateful by the trust that you put in us, and we're there for you. So you can find us online at theology4theunwanted.com or on Instagram, X, Twitter, and TikTok. Threads, social media generally at Theo Unwanted. Until next time, take care.